Hey, it's Vicky, and today I'm here to talk about the books that I read in December. How did I wrap up 2023? As I've talked about in previous videos, the month of December was, personally, it was rough for a number of reasons, and I'm not gonna dwell on it. I'm not gonna, continue to talk about it, except I'll just say it wasn't the greatest. And quite frankly, I'm glad that December's over and that we're just moving on. But despite all the craziness of December, I managed to read 9 books, which, again, when I was like tallying things up, I was surprised. I read 3 print books, 1 ebook, and 5 audiobooks. So clearly, audiobooks were king in December. They got me through the month. And yeah, that has not happened very often where audiobooks has outnumbered the print books. So interesting. I also had 2 DNFs in December, so we have a lot to discuss. Let's get into it. So first, let's get the DNFs out of the way, because let's just get them out of the way. So this one, I was a little bummed to DNF this one because it was part of a project I was working on that I was hoping to, complete 100%. And it didn't quite work out that way, but I DNF'd this Scorched Earth by William Geer. This is a World War II, what? No. This is a Civil War story, and I made it about 75 pages in. Did I still have the bookmark in here? No. But I made it about 75 pages in, and I was so bored, and I was not following what was going on. It just was not connecting, and I thought, you know what, I can't waste my time on a book I'm not enjoying. So I DNF'd it. So this was part of my Revisit Remix. It was the 4th and final book I was supposed to read for that. So I didn't complete it, which is fine because I tried it, didn't like it, so it's getting unhauled. Yeah, wasn't for me. The other DNF I had was also slightly disappointing because this was an anticipated 2023 release that I was thinking I would enjoy, especially around the Christmas season. I DNF'd The Kingdom of Sweets. I don't know the author's name. I will put the cover here so you can see it. But I made it about 130 pages or so into this one, and it just wasn't doing it. This is a Nutcracker retelling, like a dark retelling, and once it hit the point where basically the Nutcracker story that we all know, once that part of the story was over, which was about at the point I DNF'd it, it just stopped being interesting to me and I didn't care. So I DNF'd it. So the first book that I did complete in December was Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. This is my 3rd Toni Morrison book and has now become my favorite. This one is about a young man named Milkman Dad. I had to think for a second. His real name is Macon Dad, but he goes by Milkman, and you find out why he has that nickname. But it's basically about his life. You meet him when he's a little kid and you see him grow up, and it's just about him living his life. So it has like coming of age elements. I did not realize, and it doesn't come out and blatantly say it, but this book does take place in the Detroit area, which was kind of cool. And overall, I really, really enjoyed this. I got so absorbed in the characters, not only in Milkman, but the, secondary characters were also very interesting. There was just a lot of interesting relationship dynamics, especially within Milkman's family. There was a lot of just interesting things going on. The writing in here was so good. There were so many places where I underlined things, like whole paragraphs where I was like, okay, that was amazing. I did that quite a bit in this book. So the only reason I did not give this 5 stars was because basically because of the ending. For the most part, this is sort of a slow burn kind of book. I definitely took my time with it. But when it got to the ending, it started to feel very rushed, and then it sort of just ended, and I didn't love that. I wanted more of a poetic ending, and it wasn't quite that. But otherwise, this is fantastic. Like I said, it's my new favorite Toni Morrison, and I am so glad that I read this. Next, I read The Weight of Silence by Heather Gutenkopf. I listened to this one on audio, and it's sort of a mystery sort of book because it centers around, it takes place in a very short period of time, like a day or so, where one morning these two little girls who are next door neighbors and their friends, they go missing. And the one little girl, I can't remember her name. I feel like I read this a million years ago, but anyway, she has mutism. And so basically the story is going multiple POVs, including the two little girls who are missing, trying to figure out where they are. So you meet a couple of the parents, you talk to one of the policemen, one of the siblings of one of the little girls. So there's a lot of POVs in this, and I think that made it interesting, the way it kind of jumped around like that, and you saw different aspects of this whole scenario, and that made it interesting. And the writing was also good. But other than that, I felt like the plot itself, the missing girls, where they were, what ended up happening, and all of that, the reveal, I guess you could say, fell a little flat for me. And so for that, and also I felt like some of the inner monologues that you got from some of the characters, it just didn't really seem to make sense given the situation. So like, for example, one of the POVs is the one little girl, the girl who has mutism. Can't remember what her name is, but her mother's name was Antonia. She was one of the POVs. And there were so many things in her like inner monologue going on that just to me as a mom didn't make sense. Like, okay, your child is missing. Like, that would be all you'd be thinking about. And instead she's like reflecting on this, basically this past relationship that she had with this other guy, this guy that like, it was like her first love in high school. And I'm like, why are you thinking about that when your daughter's missing? Like, it was just weird to me. So I don't know, it was weird. But like I said, it did have solid writing. It did have, I liked the different POVs, but overall it was okay, it was good. You know, I didn't love it, didn't hate it, so I gave it 3 stars. Next, I listened to another audiobook, and this one I picked up really quick because I had realized that for the Books in the Freezer reading challenge, I had totally forgotten to read a translated work. So I was like, ooh, I gotta find one really quick. And so I came across this one on, it's not called Scribd anymore. Everand, is that what it's called? You guys know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so I found the audiobook for this on there, and the book is called The Hole, and it's by Pyun Hwa Young. Probably saying that wrong, and I apologize, but it's translated by Sora Kim Russell from, I believe, Korean. And it's a short little novel about this guy who, when you first meet him at the beginning of the book, he wakes up and he's in a hospital, and he is severely injured, he's paralyzed, cannot move, cannot speak, and all he knows, and he slowly starts to kind of learn that he and his wife were in an accident, and that's why he's in the situation he's in, and his wife passed away in the accident, and he is now being nursed back to health by his mother-in-law. And the story just sort of goes from there. It gets pretty dark. It was definitely a story where the narrator, as you get to know him, you like him less and less. You find out he's not a great guy. No, not really. And he's also not very reliable. There's definitely things that he's not telling you, things like that. So it was dark, and it gets darker and darker as you progress. And it was definitely giving off Misery vibes by Stephen King, because here you have this person who's being nursed back to health by someone that you know isn't quite right. And so it was interesting, but also at the same time, it was sort of forgettable. There wasn't anything about it that really wowed me. Honestly, if I was to compare it to Misery, I think Misery was a way better story. So there's that. So all in all, this was okay. Once again, okay. I gave it 3 stars. It helped me fulfill my Books in the Freezer challenge. So there's that. Then I listened to another audiobook. Like I said, audiobooks were my friend this month. I listened to My Darling Girl by Jennifer McMahon. This is her newest release that came out in October. And I wanted to listen to this one in December because it takes place at Christmas time. And that was one of the things I loved about it, was that you have this Christmas setting with this family, and they're doing all the things. They're, you know, decorating the tree and putting up decorations and baking cookies and doing the shopping and all that stuff. And it was just fun to listen to this while I myself was wrapping gifts and doing the Christmas things. So it was the perfect time, first of all, to read this book. And then also, this book just checked a lot of boxes for me. It centers around our main character, whose name is Allison, who growing up had a not good relationship with her mom. Her mom was not nice. And so in adulthood, she is estranged from her pretty much. But then one day gets this call from her mother's assistant who tells her that her mom has cancer, only has weeks to live, and she wants to spend her final weeks with her daughter and be at their house at Christmas. So for some reason, Allison agrees to this. So her mom comes to stay. And when she shows up, weird things start happening. Creepy things. Just odd, strange things. And so for me, this ticked boxes because it dealt with mother-daughter relationship, which to me is always very interesting. And oddly enough, there was a lot of things about this book that hit me hard. Without getting too much into it, my mom and I have not always had a great relationship. It's gotten better as I have grown into adulthood, but it wasn't always great. That's all I'll say. And so that's part of the reason the mother-daughter relationship in books is interesting to me. And in this case, there were things about this book that hit home a little bit. So that was the first thing. Then, without getting into too much, I don't want to spoil things. Yeah, I don't want to say anything else. There was another aspect of this book, is what I'll say, that is a favorite trope of mine when it comes to horror. And that's all I'll say about that. So for me, this book, it was all about the right timing. It ticked some boxes. It was entertaining. It was a little predictable. The twist that happened towards the end was fun. And I can say I didn't see coming. But also at the same time, for the most part, the story was sort of predictable. But I loved it. I thought it was very entertaining. It was great. It had some great creepy moments. And I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read a classic, my third classic for 2023. So I didn't read a lot of classics. But this is one I had never read. And I wanted to read it because it was on my TBR. And that is A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And this one, it deals with a little girl named Sarah who begins to go to this little boarding school in England because her dad is a captain and he is stationed in India and has a lot of money. So when Sarah starts going to this boarding school, she has all the privileges. She has the best room in the place. She has a little servant. She has the greatest clothes, all this sorts of things. And then something happens and she loses all of those privileges. And the thing about Sarah as a character is that even when she was rich and all of that, she was so sweet. She's a character that you cannot help but like. You just like her. She's so kind. She's so down to earth. She has such a great imagination and is just a joy, right? So that to me was what really carried the book. There were definitely parts of this book that got bleak, that got really sad. There's one scene in particular that just, broke my heart. But I think overall it's mostly very inspiring and just heartwarming, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read the first of my 2 Christmassy books that I wanted to read in December. So first I read The Christmas Dress by Courtney Cole, and this one takes place in Chicago, and it deals with our main character, Meg, who after her father passes away, she moves back home to Chicago to take care of his apartment building that he owned and sort of operated. And it was the place where she grew up as a kid. And at this point in the game, it's a little run down. Things are constantly breaking, but the tenants are so nice and everyone sort of has this bond. And that was probably my favorite thing about the whole book, was the setting and the other characters, how they all were just like this little family. But the sort of Christmas aspect of this was that one of the apartment tenants is elderly woman who is getting ready to move into a nursing home at the wish of, you know, she doesn't want to, but her daughter is kind of making her. And she's packing up her stuff, and she has this dress that she wore years and years ago on Christmas Eve. Or was it Christmas Eve? I want to say it was around Christmas time. And that night that she wore this dress was both an amazing night and a terrible night. But it's a dress that, like, it's timeless, it's beautiful, and she decides to give it to Meg because she thinks it will bring Meg some luck, because Meg obviously is grieving after losing her dad, and then she's left her job in the fashion industry. She was living in New York, and she leaves that job to come and stay in Chicago, and so she feels like her career's over and all this stuff, and she's just having a hard time. So she gives her this dress, and then the story sort of goes from there. And I think overall this was a cute story. To me, the Christmas aspect was not as prevalent as I thought it was going to be. But I think it was still a very heartwarming story. There was a romance in it that was, you know, predictable but cute. That also had a, you know, the typical third act conflict, right? With the romance, you know, that something pops up and it needs to be resolved. And so I think this was just a nice story to just listen to in general. Though, like I said, it wasn't giving off all of the Christmas vibes that I was hoping it would, but it was still good. I enjoyed it. I actually have another book by Courtney Cole, another Christmas book that I'm saving for next December that I'm going to read. But for me, this one was good. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read the second Christmas book for the Christmas season, and this one I enjoyed quite a bit more, honestly. I read The Christmas Sisters by Sarah Morgan. This one deals with 3 sisters that originally lived in and grew up in Scotland, but now 2 of the sisters live in New York City, and the other sister stayed back and lives in the same town where her parents live, that, you know, the girls grew up in. And they're all getting together for Christmas, but they all have stuff going on in their lives, all different things, different dramas, different this, different that, and they're kind of coming together and trying to sort out their stuff while also enjoy the Christmas holidays. And first of all, I physically read this, but I listened to the audiobook as I was reading it, and the audiobook narration, because most of the characters are Scottish, they had a Scottish accent, and I loved that. It brought such a extra little oomph to the story, and I loved the setting. This little, you know, this little town in Scotland near the mountains, and it's snowy, and there's, you know, a little coffee shop, big shop in town, and just all that sort of stuff. I loved the vibes. I loved the setting. And for me, what made this book super enjoyable, even though it wasn't overly Christmassy, because honestly the majority of the book takes place before Christmas. Like, the last little bit is actually like Christmas. But for me, it was the story. The story was so good, and all of the 3 sisters and their sort of separate things that they had going on, I was super invested in all of them. And I thought it just had good writing, good characters. It was dramatic, but also in the end very heartwarming and just sort of cozy. And I definitely vibed the most with the sister named Beth. I think she's the middle sister, because she is at the start of the book, she's a stay-at-home mom. She has 2 little girls, and she's thinking about and wanting to go back to work. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in the same point in my life. I've been a stay-at-home mom, and now I'm getting ready to go back to work, and it's just, that's like her big thing in her life at the moment. So of course I identified with that immensely, and she was probably my favorite character because I just probably related to her the most. But honestly, I really enjoyed this, and I actually now want to seek out more Sarah Morgan books. I know she has quite a few other books that take place at Christmas time, so I will definitely be on the lookout for those. And then she actually has a new book coming out in the summer that is like just a summary read, and I think I might try it because, like I said, this was surprisingly very good, and I really liked it. And now she has a ton of other books, so I have a ton of backlist things I can read, as well as, you know, she has a 2024 release coming out. So yes, I definitely if you like sort of Christmas time, family drama, it has a lot of, to me, it has a lot of like women's fiction vibes, but I really loved this. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read my 5th Stephen King book of the year, and honestly, I finished this on New Year's Eve, like right at the end of the year. But I listened to the audiobook of From a Buick 8, but it basically centers around this police, what am I thinking? A police troop, there you go, in Pennsylvania, where they come across this car, this Buick, and it's weird. It's not of this earth, right? There's weird little things about it that don't make any sense. And then they decide to sort of stow it away in this, like, barn thing. And the book is basically these sort of stories revolving around things that have happened with this car. Because without getting into too many, like, spoilers or details, yeah, weird things happen with this car. And to people that are around the car and things like that. And the way the story was told, though, was one of the cops, who at the beginning of the book is dead, but his son is now like a teenager, and he's been doing work with the police force. Like, they're teaching him to be a dispatcher or something. And so they start to kind of bring him into the circle, you know, the circle of trust when it comes to this car, and start telling him about this car and the stories surrounding the car and the history of the car. And so it almost felt like kind of like a collection of stories, but they're all tied to this car. And for me, that narrative choice didn't really work. It just felt sort of disjointed, and it just wasn't my favorite. And I don't know why. Because a lot of times that doesn't bother me, but for some reason in this, I don't know. I wanted there to be more fluidity with the plot. And it's also the type of story that if you hate when you don't get all the answers, you will not like this, because you aren't getting any answers about this car. I'll tell you that. Which was also a similar thing in Stephen King's book, The Colorado Kid. It sort of reminded me of that there's some things in that book that you think as the reader you're going to find out, and you don't. And so for some people, that can be very frustrating. And it didn't bother me much in this book, but it's just something I felt like I should mention because I know some people hate that. So yeah, I think it explored interesting themes because it did talk a lot about grief, because like I said, this teenage kid is still grieving the loss of his father, wants to be connected to his father, and that's why he's sort of doing these things with the police, and he, you know, sort of, and they sort of bring him in under their wing and sort of, you know, start teaching him things and talking about the car because his dad was one of them. And so I liked how it explored grief and how it sort of explained or explored how you can't always explain things. Some things are just the way they are and you don't know why. And I liked that idea, but like I said, it was the narrative choice that I didn't love in this. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And then I finished off 2023 by reading S.A. Cosby's newest book, All the Sinners Bleed. I read this one on my Kindle. And this one centers around a police sheriff named Titus, who is a sheriff in this small community in the South. And one day this school shooting happens at the high school. So of course he and his deputies, or whatever you want to call them, I don't know terms, they all respond to this shooting. And the shooting sort of opens up this whole other thing that's been going on in the town that Titus now has to investigate and is figuring out. So it's very much a detective mystery, and you're trying to put the pieces together and figure out some sort of mystery. And I really liked the plot. I thought that it was well done. It was very dark and gritty, and that's what I like in a detective mystery. I like when it gets dark and gritty, and you get to know, you not only get this great story, this great mystery, but you also get some interesting characters, and you really get into them as people. And this book did that too. You really get to know Titus as a person, and what his everyday life is like being a sheriff in a community that is mostly white, and he's a black man, and how that affects his work and his life. And so the also, without getting too much into the mystery aspect, because I think you should go in knowing nothing. But I will say that part of the mystery does also dive into aspects of religion, and I thought that was examined very well. And then, again, because we're talking about a sheriff who is black, and he's a sheriff in a predominantly white community, race comes up a lot. There's issues of class that come up a lot. And so those sorts of things were interesting. The only thing about this, and I had this same issue with Razor Blade Tears when I read it, which was S.A. Cosby's release prior to this one, is sometimes Titus came across as a little overly macho and like sort of cheesy. Like some of the stuff he would say, like, you know, it was meant to be like, to like show you that, oh, Titus is a badass, right? He's this badass man. And I get it, but it also would make me laugh sometimes. Like, is this guy for real? And I had the same issue with the two dads in Razor Blade Tears. So, and it's not enough to make me not want to read S.A. Cosby. I feel like it's just his vibe. It's just the way he writes his male characters sometimes. It is what it is. I can overlook it because on the whole it was a good book. It's just there were times where I was like, ooh, that was a little cringy. So all in all, if you enjoy, you know, detective mysteries, especially ones that take place in the South, because you can really get that vibe of like, it's hot, it's this and that, and like just the culture of the South, I would say definitely check this out. I gave it 3.5 stars. All right, so that is it. Those are all the books that I read in December. It was a pretty good month reading wise. Like I said, I'm surprised that I read as many books as I did, because at the time as things were happening, I didn't feel like I was reading that much. But yeah, let me know down below what your favorite read of December was. What was the last book you read in 2023? I would love to know, whether you liked it or not. Let me know that too. And yeah, if you guys read any of these books, I would love to know what you thought of them. And I guess that's it. So I hope you guys had a good end of 2023 and that 2024 treats you well. And I will chat with you soon. Thank you so much for watching.